Hello, hello everyone. Welcome to yet another episode of Angular Space TV. Very pretentious name, right? So I think today's stream is kind of anticipated. A lot of people liked the tweet where I announced it. We are going to continue talking about Angular v21. It's a bit, I feel that it's a bit of a, it's not talked that much, or maybe Elon killed the engagement on Twitter again, or whatever. I don't see very many people posting about Angular 21, and it's certainly not the biggest release in terms of like stable functionality that has been added. There just isn't that much of it. Of course, we got signal forms, but they're experimental, so for now, maybe lots of people kind of refrain from posting about it. And some other features are cool, but maybe not that popular. I, but I think that one thing that kind of goes unnoticed right now, that there isn't much talking about it, is Zoneless. We're going to talk about Zoneless today. And what's interesting to me is that I think everyone was waiting for Zoneless. Everyone was anticipating this moment for so long. We were saying like, why do we need Zone.js? It causes problems and so on. Hey, Michael, it causes issues. Why do we need it? There was so many interview questions, and I'm going to talk about interview questions today too. And it seems like Angular going zoneless will be like a big explosion of engagement about it because it's such a highly anticipated thing. So it's been hype on Blue Sky. Oh, maybe I need to go on Blue Sky more. It's just that don't get me wrong. I have a Blue Sky account. I used to post there a bit, and like it's not bad. I had no issues with it. It looks kind of like Twitter. It's all right. There's been all sorts of talks like all people there or all people on Twitter, this or that. I don't care about that. I usually go on social media to read about tech and Angular and our work. And I just forget to go on there. I don't also go on LinkedIn, although I don't like LinkedIn. And usually when I post on LinkedIn, I get more engagement than on Twitter, but I just don't seem to care about it. So maybe I will go back to posting on Blue Sky too at some point. Oh, I don't doubt you do that. Well, thank you. uh, yeah, yeah. I think you're motivating me to go back on Blue Sky. Just started a 20.2 stable Zoneless app. Yeah, good luck. Good luck with that. I'd love to read how it goes about a more sophisticated app. Much of Blue Sky is Logan and I reposting each other, not gonna lie. Well, a lot of my live streams are you and Logan commenting and kind of like helping me out with the stuff. Although today I hope Zone.js and Zoneless in general are topic that I'm strong with. I hope maybe I will be able to figure this out all on myself. So, yeah. So yeah, again, hello everyone. Let's get started talking about Zoneless. But obviously, before we are able to talk about Zoneless, we need to talk about Zone.js. And before we talk about Zone.js, we need to talk about change detection. Okay. And I feel that this is a topic that it's kind of both overrated and underrated in terms of it's a bit overrated during interviews, like, oh, someone didn't know change detection well or Zone.js well, and this other one person knew that and so on. But in like your day-to-day life, like how many times did you had to use ng-zone, for example, to run something outside of Angular? even if, like, of course, we say that it's important to use change detection strategy on push, but let's be honest, how many applications actually do that, and how bad is the performance hit they take because of it? It exists, it can be bad. On push is a very obvious optimization that you can do, but I bet if you don't really deeply understand how change detection works, you can still be a decent Angular developer. There's no problem with that. Maybe not a super senior level, but obviously you can develop apps in Angular without a solid understanding of how change detection works. So in that way, it's kind of overrated because we ask about it in interviews, we write articles, but in real life, it's like, a lot of times. But it's also underrated in terms of when we talk about actually understanding what's going on there. There are people who are very confident about what they know about change detection and very wrong. I used to be one of them. I used to think that I understand how it works. Essentially, I used to think that if you give me a scenario, I could, in my mind, think that this or that thing would happen in terms of change detection, and I was wrong very often. And so I did a lot of digging, I did a lot of reading, and most important part, which we're going to do today a lot, I was trying a lot. Trying just different, like even outlandish scenarios just to see how change detection will work. And I guess that gives me the authority to try to help everyone else understand how it works. So yeah, we will go this way. We'll talk a bit about change detection. We'll talk about Zone.js, and then we'll start understanding how Zoneless works and what caveats it has, because it has caveats. Okay. Before I show anything, let's just do the philosophical part so that we're all on the same page. So change detection is something, a process, and I'm right now I'm doing something from completely like from scratch. If you're an Angular dev who has no idea how change detection works, we're starting right at the big bang of Angular here. And the thing is, we know that in Angular, at least in the past, let's forget about signals and so on. In Angular, we can have properties on our component classes. So that's our state. That's the data that we have. And we can use those properties in the class, in the component template. And when we change those properties, we assign something new, we push into an array or whatever, our UI is updated. So change detection is the process that tells Angular what and where it needs to update. Okay. I am not going deep into that part, like, oh, change detection found out that this view in the template has changed and now it's being re-rendered. We're not talking about that, because here is one kind of misconception that I see sometimes in interviews. I've done a lot of interviews with Angular developers, maybe more than 100. And a misconception that partly is there is that change detection does re-rendering. That's not what's happening. The engine that's doing re-rendering just does the re-rendering. It knows how to do the re-rendering. Change detection essentially tells which parts need to be re-rendered. So which views and which properties of HTML elements need to be updated and so on. So change detection is not doing re-rendering or anything. Change detection is a mechanism of discovering what needs to be re-rendered. Okay. Michael Rainer and I on the adjacent topic on push are of a generally same take. Until signals, doing good practice on CD zone is more of an Angular nerd thing than normal dev thing. But now it is easy. Yeah, I agree. I agree with signals is better, and on push right now actually is changing a lot more. We'll talk about it subsequently today. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I agree with this take. So it is even more important to talk about like zoneless and change detection today. I like the book Angular Change Detection from Simplified by Brecht Billiot. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. Yeah, I liked a lot of his content. I haven't read this particular book, but my guess would be that it's very decent. It's kind of a I'm kind of sorry that it stopped writing about Angular. I think he switched to doing full-on AI stuff. I remember being subscribed to his newsletter, and I remember receiving an email that said that he's switching to AI and so on. So yeah, it's a bit of a pity, but yeah, I bet it's a good book. So yeah, where were we? Yeah, we're talking about change detection. So myth we dispel today. Number one, change detection is not doing re-rendering. It's not about re-rendering. It's about finding out what needs to be re-rendered. So how does change detection work? Essentially, maybe it would be a good idea if I actually share my screen, because I have a small project prepared. Yeah. Prepared for today. Yeah, okay. So we have this project titled Zoneless. Is very new app. It has just two components, one component called Sum component and the app component. By the way, still cannot get used to not writing component here. Actually, in the component that I authored, I just put the prefix, suffix, yeah. So yeah, change detection. So essentially what change detection does is trying to find your bindings and see which of them have changed. So for example, let's say I have something like this X property, and I could do something like, yeah, I could do X here. So I'm using interpolation. This is called interpolation. I'm probably going to use that term again. So this is a type of binding. So binding is essentially, well, we all know what it is. In the template, we bind some part of the template, a text or an HTML attribute to a property of our component class. This is a binding. And by binding, we mean that if this updates, this will be updated in the template. And that updating process, before the updating, discovering that it needs to be updated, is the change detection process. Okay, so essentially it goes through your template and it goes through your bindings and it checks if this has been changed after the previous cycle. So let's say this says 7 now, it will interpolate, it will show in the UI as 7. And let's say in some way this has been updated to be 8, right? So now the next time change detection happens, it will go through these bindings, it will come to this binding and see that in the UI it says 7, but now the current value of this property is 8, and it will say, okay, this needs to be updated, this needs to be re-rendered. And that's essentially the process of change detection. And usually when we talk about Zone.js, well, almost arriving there, when we talk about Zone.js, we say that usually change detection happens top to bottom. So it starts with our root component. So app component here, it detects this, the change detects this, then it sees that it has a child component or multiple child components, and it goes to this component's template and checks here and so on until it has checked everything. Okay, I'm talking about Zone.js setup where no signals and no on push used on any component. In that scenario, it goes from root to all of your components, checks everything, all the templates, and yeah, this happens. So it does checkings on your bindings. This is where that dreaded error happens, because that change detection actually happens in kind of two phases. It does checking, and after the detection, and if you have some unstable state, so for example you have some interval, for example, that's going on too fast, or a stream that is too frequent, during the checking the change detection will say that it will realize that, oh, this value changed so fast, I already kind of made it update to this value, but now it's this other value, and maybe there is a bug, there is something wrong going on, and this will be hard to detect for the developers, so I better throw a warning. Well, it's thrown as an error, but it's essentially a warning. So yeah, that's where the pain comes from change detection, where we have this terrible error that we get a expression changed after it has been checked. We're all familiar with it. So yeah, it's all has to do with change detection. Now, we say that change detection goes through, and here is, by the way, another myth, another misconception. Some developers, too many for me to ignore, not an insignificant amount. Sometimes developers think that change detection goes through your component class properties. So it like literally checks the properties of your class to see if they've changed. It doesn't. It actually doesn't keep any memory about what you have in your component. What it does, it checks the bindings in the template, takes those values and compares with the current values and sees if there has been an update. If there is a difference, it says, okay, in the component, this property now has a new value. It used to be 7, now it's 8. So dear renderer, maybe you need to go to the UI and update it. Okay. So misconception number 2 that I've encountered during many Angular interviews, and not only interviews. Now, we talk about change detection doing this, right? Going through templates, checking bindings, but why does it do that? Obviously, when we talk about simple properties that we have on our classes, component classes, Angular kind of has no way of knowing that they have changed. Like when I assign to a property of a class, or I assign to a variable or whatever, there is no secret event stream that goes somewhere and you can subscribe to and figure out that, oh, this property changed its value, so maybe I need to check something. And this, when you realize this, it makes it kind of interesting if you haven't been deep into Zone.js stuff. Like, so how does Angular know that it needs to actually do the change detection and then update the UI? And this is very interesting. Now we're going to talk about Zone.js. And actually, well, we complained about Zone.js a lot, right? And rightfully so. It had issues. The Angular team was absolutely straightforward about the fact that it has issues. But it's a very interesting kind of like engineering feat how it all used to work, because it used to work like magic, right? You could just push something into an array and you have this ng4 like right in the past, and it would update. You would have new items, or you could delete something from an array, or you could do whatever. You could do any sort of updates and the UI would be synchronized with your state. So was the deal there? Like, how did that used to work? So again, there is no event bus. There's no way that you can know about these property updates. So how do you make it work? So what the Angular team kind of realized and then implemented was, like, let's think about how the state updates happen. Like, how does any variable or any property update in any JavaScript environment? Essentially, you have either a synchronous update or asynchronous update, right? It makes sense that there's only like 2 modes where we can run code. It's either sync or async. So sync code is easy. Your component is created. You synchronously assign initial values of your properties. You have already these values. You can do some rendering, right? You can say, okay, this is the template, this is the state, this is initial state. So I will render the initial UI. There you go. Now, when you stop doing all these synchronous activities, it stops at some point, right? It won't run forever, because if a synchronous process runs forever, you will never get any asynchronous processes, any callbacks, any whatever working, because JavaScript is single-threaded. And it will be problematic anyway, because none of your functions are supposed to run forever. So the next thing is like, okay, so either the properties are being assigned or reassigned synchronously, so initially, or they are going to be reassigned in the future when there's something asynchronous happening. Something happening in the future by definition cannot be synchronous. It would either be something like a promise resolving, or a browser event like user clicking somewhere, or set timeout or set interval because we're talking about the future events, future changes to properties. And so the Angular team was like, yeah, sure. If we had a mechanism, we don't have a mechanism to detect the change of properties. But if we had a mechanism that could just tell us that something asynchronous happened, we could then just, react to it, right? And here we're arriving, I think, at the third misconception, because we are kind of entering the waters where people understand how Zone.js works, but maybe not entirely correctly. And there you go. You're not simply listening to async events. That's not what's happening. Because technically you kind of could. You could. I think you could listen to all browser events just using window, right? Those events, most of them would bubble up to, you know, window anyway, and you could like manually monkey patch like promises or whatever and call it a day. But of course, that's not a good thing. That won't be a good thing. So you need some sort of layer that would isolate your Angular app and say that, okay, anything that happens inside of it, anything asynchronous, I want to catch. And there is where Zone.js comes in. Okay, so before we go a bit deeper into it, what Zone.js was doing, it was monkey patching those asynchronous events, so like event listeners, promises, set timeout, set intervals, actually even async await, but there was a lot of compiler magic going on there because async await is kind of impossible to monkey patch as it is. It's a syntactic sugar anyway. So yeah, what Zone.js was doing is creating this zone of isolation for the Angular app, and whatever async stuff that we cared about, that's an important distinction, happens inside the Angular app, Zone.js would catch it and it will notify the uh, change detection mechanism. Okay, it will notify your Angular app. It will say, okay, something happened. Maybe you need to check. And then the Angular app will do the change detection, find if has been something that has changed actually, if there is a piece of UI that needs to be refreshed, and then it will just go on and refresh it. Okay. And it's kind of very interesting in terms of implementation. Like that's kind of spectacular, if you ask me. Again, if you remember how our Zone.js times, for example, compare it to React, right? In React, especially it's good if you try to compare it to class-based React, although it's been a long time now, everyone uses hooks and functional-based components. But you used to have, well, you still have, but you used to actually use class-based components in React, and there, when you wanted to update the state, you didn't update the state. You didn't update any random property in any fancy way you wanted. What you did, you had a state property, a mandatory, all the state live as an object inside that property, and you needed to call setState, a special method that every component had inherited from the component class, and you needed to pass a new instance of that state, and you needed to clone the previous state and change whatever you needed to change on it and pass it to state. And it was, well, right now it kind of works the same way. You have useState, which gives you a setter function, so more or less the same. But in Angular, you didn't have any of that. In Angular, you would just go like this.x equals 8, and voila, your UI is updated. And it took a huge amount of engineering effort from the Angular team to make that work. And I just want to appreciate that. I don't want to just say, oh, Zone.js was garbage, glad we threw it out. It was something that used to work pretty well for something that had so many moving and complicated parts. But of course, because of all that moving and complicated parts, we experienced problems with Zone.js. Well, first of all, the educational problem, because, yeah, we just discussed that it may be not too important to know about Zone.js and change detection stuff to be a decent Angular developer. I stand by that opinion. Lots of people agreed with me today. And but yet, if you want to grow, if you want to work on more complex Angular apps where performance is super important, you will run into the Zone.js issues. And you want it or not, you need to learn about it, and it is complicated. And if you want to do it, it requires more educational effort on your part. It requires learning. So that's like downside number one. Downside number two, bundle, right? Zone.js is a separate library. Often Angular developers would maintain it like in parallel, help fix issues or maybe promote stuff that is important for Angular. But it means that this whole thing is inside your final package bundle that you kind of send to your production server, and then your end user also downloads those Zone.js lines of code inside the Angular app. You don't need a Zone.js to run a front-end app, right? So it was another dependency that kind of made Angular a bit bloated. Downside number two. Downside number three, performance-wise, is not great. So if you think about this, of course, great engineering things in terms of your code, you write code as you would, and it just works. But in terms of performance, is not great. We talked about async events, right? We said if an async event happens, Zone.js knows about it, notifies the change detector detects change, this whole process. If you are carefully listening to this for the first time, you may realize that, wait, change somewhere, an async event somewhere doesn't mean that any component has actually changed. If you This is a real thing. If you have a Zone.js based app, if you set up a set interval that just does a log in the console, just a console log, you will be constantly triggering change detection, because Zone.js will be like, yeah, some interval just kind of resolved. The callback is being executed right now. So Angular, maybe you need to go check. Cannot be sure if something has changed or not. And then you start this process. And when you have a large enough app, you have thousands of bindings. You need to change them. And if you have a lot of async events happening at the same time, yeah, that's a problem. That's a problem for performance. And for that, you have all this ng zone stuff that you need to inject and maybe run outside of Angular and say, okay, I want this async code to work, but Angular, please don't pay any attention to this. This is my thing, and so on. If you don't know about ng zone, we will talk a bit about it. So yeah, so now actually, there is another small misconception. People think that signals were introduced to replace RxJS. And that's simply not true in two ways, because RxJS still isn't completely optional. And even when it is, we have like first class support for RxJS, which will remain, I think, forever. And second, actually, it was introduced for the Zone.js reason, because Angular wanted to get rid of Zone.js, and we succeeded. We now, again, Zoneless is stable, version 21. And to do that, we needed a mechanism, a new mechanism that could notify Angular to do the change detection. Okay. So one way, of course, if you think about it, have you ever injected change detection ref? You could inject it, the change detector reference, and call detect changes manually. So one way your team could do that would say, okay, you know what? We are ditching Zone.js. Now, in the future, if you want to update your UI, call detect changes manually. Do whatever you want the same way, just call detect changes in the end. And that would work, obviously, but I bet no one would want to use Angular after that sort of announcement. So um, what's interesting is they kind of like solve two problems with signals. One is that like, yeah, let's introduce a sort of variable that when it is updated, Angular will automatically know. See, for the introduction of Zone.js, when we talked right about it, we said that, well, there's no way to know when some property is updated. So one way is using Zone.js, check async stuff and see if properties have changed. Or maybe there's another way. Maybe we can have a sort of wrapper around the value that works essentially like the value. So you can read, you can update the value. But when you update it, it also kind of under the hood sends us a signal, pun not intended, sends us a notification that this particular thing has changed. And this is actually solving two problems. This solves the problem of actually knowing if anything has changed, but it also solves this granularity problem. You don't now have to check everything to realize what actually has changed. If you update the X signal, Angular just knows that if the X signal has been updated, if it had references to all the places in the template where this X signal is being used, then it would just know what to update. That's not exactly how it works right now. As far as I understand, the change detection still isn't on the granularity level that Angular team wants to get to. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe someone more knowledgeable on that topic can weigh in here. But this is something that is now achievable, is no problem. And if you just switch to using signals and zoneless, you are kind of good here, right? Okay, so this is the story of how we got to zoneless, okay? And zoneless works by the assumption that if you want to update the UI, it's a simpler assumption. Just use signals. That's it. So this is still a simple assumption. It's a bit more, there are like three levels to this. Like the initial level of like when you get introduced to Angular, tutorials will just tell you, okay, reassign your property and your UI will be updated. You'll be like, okay, amazing. This is so much simpler than React. Okay. But then a few months later, you might run into this change detection issue or a performance issue or whatever, and you might start thinking, well, how does this actually work? And the explanation is super hard. We have been explaining it for 30 minutes now. I hope I did a good job. But in the sense of being hard or easy, the explanation of if you want to UI updated, just use signals is kind of in the middle, but way closer to the simple thing. So now if someone learns about Angular, we say, okay, we use signals. For your state, create a signal. You can set your value or you can read your value. Just read your values in the template code, and that's it. It will be updated whenever you change that signal. And it's very cool because it allows you to express all those dependencies, your kind of computed signals, link signals, resources, so on and so forth. So yeah, signals are actually the solutions to Zone.js. They're the primary reason of introducing signals. Okay, they are not a natural enemy of RxJS. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Michael says signals RxJS friends. I agree. RxJS has a great interoperability with signals. We'll continue to have it, and it's not a big debate for me. I use both. For state, I use signals. For events, I use RxJS. I've done a lot of profiling this weekend of signals, and RxJS and signals perform well, but definitely will be more efficient. So I think there is still some lacking optimization. Yeah, I guess we're not yet doing granular change detection. I will. It's a bit of a more advanced thing. Let's get started with the app, and I think I can show how it's supposed to work in the end. I think I kind of know about it. Hope I'm not wrong though. Okay, so let's take a look at this app. Okay, for a moment, let me. Yeah. So in each component, I just have two components for now. It's enough, and I've been trying some stuff here. Let me just delete whatever I don't need for now. Yeah, I don't need this. I don't need this. So why do I have this log change detection function? Well, it's an interesting thing because one time I was like, I needed to do some, well, not exactly profiling. I was trying to figure out how something in the change detection mechanism worked, and I was like, oh man, I wish I had a function or a way to kind of register a listener that would tell me when change detection executed. And then I was reading an article. I'm so sorry, I don't remember by whom, but I just remember one of our, I think one of the Angular GDs. I don't remember who exactly. It was just using this. It was actually Rainier's article. I don't know. I'm not sure. But and in the article, the author was like, "Yeah, we are putting this function here, and it will be called." And I was like, "Oh man, how did I not realize it?" This is the exact reason why people would tell you in the Zone.js setup, would tell you just don't use functions in the template because they will be called. Why will they be called? Because if you're doing this binding, it's a binding, right? Change detection will start checking this template, and it will see this function and it will say, well, okay, I need to display whatever this function returns. I need to check if the value that it returns is different from the value that is displayed in the UI. So for example, if I had something like 5 here, let's say this function returned 5 previously, and in UI we're already displaying 5, we need to compare this new value to 5. But the only way to find this new value is to call this function. And you can see how that is at least a little bit problematic. But in this case, we are using it to actually log change detection. So if this component is being change detected, we will see this console log. Okay, I have the same in here. This doesn't change anything in the UI. It just console logs whenever this app component is change detected, and same for here. So maybe we can just run this application and just take a look at what's going on when we simply open it up. This was with onPush and default, but in a Zone app. Zone.js app? Then profile Zone and say, okay, got it. Yeah, makes sense. I think maybe Zoneless is actually bigger optimization than having everything on push. Hard question. I don't know. Maybe depends on the app. So okay, let's open up this app. And do I have a problem here? Oh, I have something running on another port. Okay, whatever. Where is this? I love this absolutely random ports. So we have nothing for now. Obviously, this component doesn't have much of a UI, but we can see that we have change detection triggered in app component, change detection triggered in some components at the child, change detection triggered in app component, change detection triggered in some component. Now you might be tempted to ask that why is this change detection being run twice? We didn't do anything. And my honest answer to that would be I have no idea. But this is something I've observed every time. So if you even don't have any event listeners, you will have like 2 rounds of change detection when you load your app. Maybe it has something to do with what Angular does internally. I have no idea. Maybe it's a one run to render it and maybe one run to check if something has changed in that moment. I don't know, but this is something you can keep in your mind. This does happen when you do the app loading. When you start your app, you have 2 change detection cycles. Okay. Now, what we can do about this? We can try to trigger more of this change detection. We can go into the sum component, and one thing that I love to show is the fact that this is only set. Okay, just trying to show you a little bit of proof. There is no zone here. Angular JSON. Let's search for zone. It says Zoneless is the name of the the project. It doesn't have any Zone.js. Okay, in Angular JSON there are no polyfill files. I think no, 0 Zone.js. Okay, no Zone.js at all. What I want to show is another interesting misconception that people might have is, let's say I'm not using, well, obviously if I use a signal, it is going to be change detected. But let's say I have a counter property, okay, and I have an increment method. Come on, this is very obvious. Auto-completed for me. And now I'm gonna go ahead and put an increment button and a counter. So what do you think? What do you think? This is the most Zone.js based thing you could do. You have a property that it's being incremented. It's not a signal. The app is zoneless. So let's see how it works. I wasn't sharing my screen again. I'm so sorry. What I did, I added a simple property, a count property, a signal. Sorry, not a signal, just a regular property, increment method, and a button that does the increment. And we want to check if in a zoneless setup, clicking on this button will actually update the UI. For some people, the answer might actually be surprising. Let's see. Let's see. Actually, I think it works kind of flawlessly. Now, let's see. Refresh the page. We have this initial two change detection cycles. Now let's click increment. Now we have again two cycles. There's I can trigger an app component and trigger in some component. And this is interesting. So why does it work? I can actually even tell you a more interesting thing. I can actually tell you a more interesting thing. Let's put change detection strategy on push and do this again. It works. It works without signals in a zoneless app in a component that has been marked as on push. So what's happening here? What's happening here? Actually, this has to do more with how change detection works. And I've already mentioned that Zone.js does some of the scheduling. Now, this is maybe the fourth myth we're going to dispel. Maybe it's actually like two myths in one. When you write templates, and use the Angular syntax for adding event listeners, like brackets, click, whatever method handler, Angular is smart enough to see that, yeah, you've already registered this event listener. I know about this event listener. I am the one actually registering this event listener. You are just typing some proprietary Angular syntax. I'm Angular. I'm the one who is going to actually run this code when this click event happens. I can just run change detection when this click happens, when your method actually works. And then you're like, so Zone.js doesn't have to do anything with those events listeners that we register in the template. Those are asynchronous, but you don't need Zone.js to listen to those events. And this is the interesting thing, because I have also encountered the misconception that people think that change detection happens when events happen asynchronous. And I am also guilty of propagating that myth, because up until this point, I have been using language that would kind of make you think that it works that way, but that's not the actual way that it works. The way it works by kind of registering your callbacks that execute with asynchronous events. It's not like there are lots of events happening in your app all the time that you do not care about. There are scroll events, there are mouse move events, click events that you don't like register or whatever. You just don't care about those, and Angular doesn't either. It only cares about the events that you have registered as listeners. Those are the ones that can actually trigger changes in your state. User just scrolling around, if you have not registered a listener for scrolling, means your app doesn't care about scrolling. Means your state cannot be updated because the user did some scrolling. And sometimes people think, and this was also behind this whole panic, oh, don't use methods in templates. I've been always like, meh. Very often you can, with Zone.js, you can use methods in template. It's all right in many scenarios, because what your function very often does is a very simple calculation, or even worse, it's like returning another private, for example, property. You could have getter, setters. I don't get into that, but apparently people do that, and it's actually okay to use in a template with Zone.js. You are not triggering change detection by calling that function. That's not something that's happening, all right? Zone.js or no Zone.js. You are not making that function run a lot because a lot of events. This function runs every time your change detection runs. Your change detection does a bunch of things. And now you have this function that just is inside the change detection cycle. It's going to be called. If that function just simply returns some value, whatever, that's such a infinitesimally small performance hit, you could never notice it. It will only be a problem if you put a huge calculation with arrays, with nested loops, with whatever that can actually cause a problem. Or if you put stuff like HTTP requests or whatever, that way you can start spamming your backend with it. But if you're just doing a synchronous function that does a simple calculation, it could be completely all right. It's not a problem. And I think Michael here kind of shares my opinion because it says the no function templates has a lot of caveats, but like we're saying, also not entirely accurate. Yeah. As I mentioned, definitely some cases where you shouldn't do it, but I think most people that put functions into templates are not writing HTTP calls inside of those. You could kind of do it, but you shouldn't. For example, when the async pipe internally calls its own functions that fire each pipe, yeah, async pipe is actually async pipe is actually how is it called? Impure pipe. I want to say dirty pipe. Why aren't those called dirty pipes? Pure called pure? Maybe it's because pure function, impure function. So yeah, it's an impure pipe, the async pipe, because what it does, it subscribes to whatever you pass to it, like an observable or promise. It subscribes to it, and it returns the initial value or whatever, or null, right? Then it's just subscribed to that value. And when the subscriber sends something, sorry, not the subscriber, when the notifier sends something, like the observable emits a value, it will store the value inside of it. And then, because it's an impure pipe, every change detection cycle, it will manually just check that, oh, you know what? This value has changed because I've subscribed to it. I have a new latest value. Now I'm returning this new latest value. Go update the UI. Yeah. So essentially, the async pipe is this sort of bad function that we're calling in the template because it's an impure pipe. It's called every time the change detection mechanism works. On every change detection cycle, the async pipe does something. Okay, it checks, but it's a simple check. It's simpler than if you, for example, wrote a function that would unwrap a value by itself and pass that as an impure function. That would be more like problematic. But you're not doing that, right? You have an async pipe. uh, yeah, pure functions based. Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. So yeah, where were we? Talking about this component. So yeah, so this is the reason when we run, when we clicked on this button, so we got kind of like free change detection. Why did we get free change detections? Now this kind of sheds some light on what's happening here with these two things. So this button click, because we know it's a button click, it triggers change detection, and change detection starts from the root. So app component is being change detected, and some component is being change detected, and the value has been updated. But then it has another change detection, and again, I have no idea why you have this other one, but this time, some component is not change detected. This happened because we put on push on it. This component doesn't have any inputs, and it is not marked as dirty, and it just isn't change detected. So that's it. And we arrived at an important point where we try to understand what's the mark as dirty and what not. Okay. When we say marked as dirty, what we mean? Actually, when these events happen, component is marked as dirty. What do we mean? What do we mean when we say marked as dirty? It says don't run change detection right now. it's not triggering change detection or whatever. But next time, when change detection runs, make absolute sure to change detect this component. Something has happened in this component. You need to check. That's like telling Angular, okay, this is not too urgent, but please, when you recheck, definitely visit this component. Don't pay attention to its inputs, even if it's like marked as on push, and just check it. So this is a good thing if you are planning to go to an Angular interview and someone asks you about what's the difference between detect changes and mark for check. Here's a solid explanation. Mark for check. If we, let's say we inject inject change detector ref. So whatever. So in the function, we can call either detect changes or we can call mark for check. So what's the difference between those two? Well, the difference is detect changes does what it says it does. It triggers change detection. You know, if we go inside of it, we have like check this view and its children, change detector and its children, and so on. Okay, this does change detection starting from this view. Now, mark for check, on the other hand, doesn't do anything at that moment. Actually, it only makes sense for on push. As you can see right here in the Angular's own documentation, it says when a view uses the change detection strategy, explicitly marks the view as changed so that it can be checked again. So this is only useful for on push components. And with it, you can say, okay, I know this component is an on-push component. I know no inputs have been changed, no async, no event listeners. And when I say event listener, I mean the DOM event listeners, like this one here. I'm not talking about like having set timeout or whatever here, okay? If we have no way, if we know that Angular won't update this view because it doesn't have inputs, it doesn't have this, for example, and we have to, in a way, tell Angular to kind of skip that and actually definitely check this component. So mark for change, mark for check, sorry, is a way of telling Angular to ignore this component being on push for a moment and actually checking it. Okay. Next time you get asked that question, feel free to use that answer. That is the correct answer. So yeah. So, okay, we don't need this, but we realized something important about the change detector ref. So again, going back to this, we have change detection triggered once because some component kind of made us detect this change. Okay, and it started from the app component. It checked the sum component because it was marked as dirty because of this. Because of this, it was marked as dirty. We didn't have to write mark as dirty here, and it ran. But the second time app component was checked, some component wasn't checked because it was already checked previously. And obviously, when you check a component, it now becomes clean. It needs to become dirty again to be rechecked, and it's now clean because of this previous iteration, and now it won't be rechecked. Sounds a bit complicated, but in general, when you kind of get the think about it in the most optimal way, like think that from the perspective of Angular team, they try to make it as optimal as possible. And when you think about it that way, it kind of all makes sense. Yeah, we have, I think we have two questions. Hi, Arman. Hi, I do have one query regarding the behavior of set timeout in zone. That's actually the next thing I was going to do. Set timeout in zone, it's like we won't do anything here, right? But as in the zone app, we use it in some cases to trigger CD. So what now? I just want to clarify, did you use set timeout to trigger change detection? Like you would call simply set timeout and know that set timeout with 0 so that zone would pick that up and do change detection? Am I correct here? Like how to handle those code now after upgrading the Zoneless, as even mark for check won't trigger CD but schedule for next, right? but you have manual change detection didn't go away. You still can call. Sorry, I forgot again. I forgot to share my screen. Okay, you can just use change detector ref detect changes, and it will work. Actually, let me show you. Let me show you. Let's forget about this increment for a moment, and let's change the constructor. And here let's do set interval, and let's increment this dot count every 2 seconds, not 22. Yeah. And we don't have this button anymore. Okay. Let's see what it does. I think actually it does nothing. And this is an expected behavior. This is an expected behavior. Now, if you would go and add, sorry. Da, 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 da. Now, if we go on and add a mark for check, that would also do nothing, I think. Oh, no, it does transaction triggered in app component. It does do something. It will be hard for me to explain this. I can see that it's being updated because I've been calling mark for check. So actually, I haven't been calling detect changes again. If this helps, please take a look again. I'm not even calling detect changes. I'm calling mark for check in the sum component with on push. What will happen if I remove this on push strategy? It will continue to work. Every 2 seconds, it's being updated because we marked it for check. So we can use mark for check as a. Let's also remove this and try to. Yeah, without mark for check, it simply doesn't work. And it's kind of expected, but yeah, without mark for check, it doesn't work. But if you put mark for check, it is being updated. But I have a hard time of actually explaining why the app component is being change detected in terms of like, this is a zoneless app. So why does this set interval trigger anything? We're not using a signal here. Um, maybe we do need someone smarter than me on this live stream. Michael, are you still watching? So again, to continue to answer your question, at least like practically, yeah, just using mark for check should solve a problem. But if you somehow found yourself in a situation where it doesn't solve the problem, where mark for check doesn't cut the deal, you can just manually call detect changes. That should be a last resort, but it's definitely better than using set timeout or like set interval or whatever to trigger change detection. That's like a weird way of doing that, and it could be really confusing. Unless I'm missing some bit of context that is important. So please leave another comment clarifying so that I can maybe give a better answer. Yeah. So yeah, mark for check, as we have seen in a zoneless app, it actually kind of cut the deal. But again, you're not going to run mark for check manually a lot too. It's not a. I wouldn't obviously say it's a bad practice to call the like mark for check all the time. It's not a bad practice, but it's probably something that you not last resort, but at least like penultimate resort. By the way, penultimate means uh, next to last, and some people think it just means even more ultimate. Maybe another myth we dispel today, other than signals and the Zone.js related ones. Um, no idea, to be honest. I would either use the Angular profile or use the Chrome memory profile with the flag that makes Angular events like CD separate from other processes. Yeah, makes sense, but do I want to go that deep? It is scheduling for next set timeout. Uh, I'm gonna be honest and say this doesn't help me a lot. I don't really get. Maybe I don't need actually a code snippet, but like it's just uh, I don't realize why is the timeout causing a problem. That does adding manual change detection to the callback help, or maybe adding mark for check. If it does, uh, then yeah, it should do the trick. Matthew is also a good example on his GitHub about change detection. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Maybe we should go on and find it. No, actually, I'm not. I'm not kind of finding it. Yeah. Okay, so that's the part about using mark for check and so on. But what's interesting is that like on another myth that we're going to dispel is like on push is not necessary for zoneless apps. It is necessary. It's a separate optimization. It's not related in many ways to Zone.js and zoneless setup. So let's just take a look at it. So let's say we forget about this for a moment. Let's say this component actually has an input dot, maybe just input. And let's say we're showing the input here. I don't need this. Now here, let's say we have something that triggers change detection. Maybe we just have another counter, and let's say we have app count, and we have a button to increment app count. Are we not able to put callbacks now in the template? Anyway, we don't need it. We can just set app count +1, increment app count, and maybe here we should like just let it be how it is. So we don't have on push here, and we have a signal here. So now we can trigger change detection on the parent component. Let's do it. So yeah, we had our initial like app component, some component checks. Let's go ahead and delete this, and let's do increment app count. And you see we have checkings in some component both times. Although we are pretty sure nothing has changed in the some component template. In the, in the, I really have to rename it to like child component or something. But I'm in too deep right now. So this runs. Although this input hasn't changed. We haven't even actually provided this input. It's an optional input. We haven't given it any value. So there is no way it's being updated. But by definition, a component that is not marked as on push is being change detected every time when its parent is detected. So if this is detecting, this is detecting. But if we just switch it back to on push, absolutely no checks in some component. Okay, absolutely none. Now, what's interesting to me, if like let's say I bring back this button, okay, and here we do like some count, and let's do like count dot set one. Oh, I cannot do set on it. This is an input. This is an input. Oh, we can make it a model. Whatever. I don't care about it that much. Now we can do sets on it. So now if we go here and let's do increment app count doesn't trigger a change detection in some component, but we'll just doing change detection in some component does trigger a change detection in app component. Okay, because it goes up to the root, starts checking it. And this is the part when I say it's not fully super duper optimized, it's not super granular, it's on its way to becoming granular, and getting rid of Zone.js is a huge part of it. That's a big step. Maybe in Angular 22, 23, I guess it's going to be more granular. Granular, when I say granular, I mean change detection will happen less and less from the top root component to the bottom, but more localized. Like this signal changed, we know where it is used. Only these things get change detected and maybe or maybe not re-rendered. I have read somewhere set timeout or all other timer events used to trigger change detection in Zone. Absolutely, that's true, but not now anymore. Yes, without Zone.js, they don't. We just saw that. Yeah, you're correct. Also, Mark for check doesn't trigger CD, but schedule CD. Yeah, that's what we were explaining. Mark for check marks the component dirty. It says this component has changed. Ignore it being on push. Ignore whatever. Next time you're doing a change detection, please check this component. Make absolutely sure to check it. But about scheduling change detection, yeah, maybe I'm not the best guy to explain it. What the scheduling change detection means. Maybe it's something like it can do a change detection later. I have no idea. Maybe we can go and read the source code. Can we do that? What if we do like that for check and let's click on it and see. Well, we have the DTS class here. Not super helpful. Maybe we need to actually open the Angular source code. Let's do Angular GitHub. Maybe we can read the source code and understand something interesting. It should be in packages, core. Oh well, SRC. Where do we go after this? Maybe But where do we in well, it comes from Angular core, so we're obviously in the correct package. How do we find it's not dependency injection change detection? Yeah, change detector ref.ts. So let's read what mark for check does. But this is an mark for check, and this is the abstract class. Wait. Change detection TS. Maybe this one. Mark for not this one. How do we scheduling? And zone scheduling and zone scheduling. Mark for check. Mark for check. Then the mark for indicates the component is dirty. And then what happens? Not super useful here too. For context, we are actually trying to answer your question. Let's find the exact difference between change detection and mark for check. And this is hard. One would think that like the change detector ref class here, It's an abstract class, so something else is being provided for it. Maybe we should check the tokens. Maybe we should check where it is used internally because it is provided as something something. To ref, I change to ref to use. Yeah, how is it creating a change detector ref? Class view ref extends change detector ref. Actually, how do we find the actual implementation? If you want to get fancy, you can launch the project in debug mode and drop a breakpoint in the CDR code inside your non-modules. Oh, that kind of makes sense. Why don't we just do that? I like making myself suffer. We can do like this mark for check. Let's just do this. I've added a mark for check in the sum component code. Now let's just go and read the actual implementation. Sum component yes, and mark for check, increment account. And yeah. Let's go inside this function and wait. Oh, I clicked the wrong button. Yeah, I need to step into next function call. Wait, what am I doing wrong? Am I again clicking the wrong button? Step into next function call. What? Why is it not going inside the mark for check implementation? It's not like this is a JavaScript built-in function. Like this is mark view dirty. Here it is like in the MGS file. It's on the debugger's ignore list. But so far we can see it does do mark view dirty. Let's find the. Oh, see, change detection scheduler notify source. Whatever that means. This sounds like mark view dirty actually does kind of trigger change detection, not immediately, not synchronously, obviously, or it won't use a detection scheduler. I bet something like this also happens when you call detect changes. Let's try something. Let's put a debugger here. But maybe not here. Maybe let's just change this to detect changes and rerun and whatever. And now cannot go inside this one too because it's again in the MGS file, but I think we can mark here dirty. Hey, wait, how did I find this? Text changes, but not here. Like, wait, what did I do last time? Where can I see the ignore list? I always forget that stuff. Angular core. It was in the. Where was it? Primary platform browser. Common module, or not common module. Zone.js. Text changes. Not really. Change vector ref is maybe we can. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, we can kind of say that change detect changes method calls the change detection synchronously. At that moment, you just start checking, but mark for check marks this component dirty, schedules change detection for the future, and make sure that this component is being checked next time the change detection runs. Okay, so they are not that different, to be honest. And now maybe actually they are a bit even more alike because previously mark for check only kind of made sense for on push components, but now you can use it to kind of override zoneless stuff. I don't know why would you prefer one over another. That's kind of a very deep topic, very deep. You shouldn't be caring about that. You should be caring about migrating to zoneless, and if that function helps you be a workaround for a while until you figure out how your component should be exactly, then feel free to just go with it. I think it kind of is better maybe than having synchronous detect changes. So maybe just use mark for check. We just figured out that you can use it to bypass the zoneless limitations. Okay. Now, where was I? Where was I? Like this, and let me check. Okay, so with the app component, we have this update, and this update is never running because these inputs are not being changed. But yeah, I remember what I was actually trying to check. So what we see here is, let's just remove this debugger points. So when we do an increment in some component, we get changes in app component, change detection in app component and some component. If we do an increment in the app component, I only get change detection in the app component because some component is on push, right? So the reason for that is when we trigger change detection for this, we get change detection for this too, because it comes from the root. But what will happen if we mark the root component as on push? That on push. Will it change anything? Let's see. App component, change triggered in. Ah, it did change something. This time it ran only once. Wait. Yeah, this time change detection ran only once. When we changed the app component to the root component to on push. Now the change detection runs only once. See? And here it again runs only once. It does run in the app component because it's still being scheduled from the root. It runs from the root to child components, but running. So actually, there is a benefit to putting change detection strategy on push on your root component. Why is it this way? No idea. I'm honestly not going to claim that I fully understand what's going on, but apparently this reduces the amount of your change detection cycles. Anyone cares to weigh in? This is interesting. This is interesting. And maybe another thing I want to check is what would happen if I don't use a signal, because the signal, so far as we understand it, does signal change does trigger change detection cycle from the root. What if we do detect changes? Detect changes is supposed to work from the current view. Let's do it. Let's do this. Instead of having a signal here, let's not have a component. Let's just have a number here, not a signal. And let's do increment. Let's change this back. Let's implement this increment method. But here we're going to be a bit smart about it and just call the text changes. Let's see how it goes. Yeah, app component is change detected, and so is the child for the first one. This is normal. Now we do increment app count. This is completely expected and normal. Now let's do increment here. You see what just happened there? Change detection triggered in some component came first. It came first. It came before the root component, but the root component also had a change detection cycle. This is so interesting. So as far as I understand, when you call detect changes, that's the first view, that's the first component that's going to get change detected. But in that run, it is going to. Oh, I guess what happens here? I don't know if I'm entirely correct here. No idea, but I have a good hypothesis what happens here. When you do mark for check, what happens is that, again, we're talking about zoneless here. Zone.js doesn't matter one bit here. We're talking about raw change detection, how it works exactly. When you do mark for check, it doesn't do detect changes in this component. Instead, it says, okay, this component is dirty. Please, in the future, do a change detection and check this component. This component is dirty. So that's why you first see a normal change detection cycle in terms of like the root component is change detected and then this child component is being change detected. Now, when you do detect changes, you say essentially right now, check changes on this component. It does it, but by doing so, it also marks that component as clean because it has been change detected, but it also triggers a future change detection in some way, maybe schedules it like mark for check does. In the end, it scheduled change detection for everyone. I have no idea. But then it's marked as clean because we just cleaned it by doing change detection exactly on it. And then the root component gets change detected, but the child component is like, yeah, I'm clean, no input changes, and I've just been change detected. So no need to check this. So key takeaway from today, the first one, putting the on push strategy on the root component actually does change something, and there is a big difference between mark for check and and detect changes in terms of how it will play out, the child first and the root after that, or vice versa, and why it makes sense in terms of like Zone.js and Zoneless. Now, we kind of dispelled all the myths we wanted. One final phase of today's stream is going to be understanding where zone breaks. We already zoneless breaks. We already did a bunch of things where we saw its limitations, obvious limitations, stated limitations. Now let's pick up on examples where it actually works. And this is important for like library authors and library consumers like ourselves, because complex libraries will have, especially like libraries for UI elements like PrimeNG and so on, will just today, Chatai, the lead of the PrimeNG team, tweeted about having problems with signal forms. And also when he was on our live stream like a month ago, I guess, we talked about PrimeNG, and he mentioned that they are going to have zoneless badges on the component. Like this one has been cleared, you can use this freely in a zoneless app. So yeah, they have lots of events going on inside, lots of state changes, and just switching to zone might be problematic. Let's first see what can cause problems. So, for example, right? Let's say we did, instead of this click event, where again, talking about registering events. So we don't do clicks. We already mentioned that when you do this via the syntax, we register an event change detection will run. You don't need signals for it. But what if we do it in a stupid way? Let's say we do. Let's say we pick it up with a change. Sorry, with a view child. Let's do button view child button, and let's say we do like, yeah, Angie after, yeah, we need to implement Angie after unit. And we do, yeah, like element listener click, and no, we're not going to do this native element signal unknown. Right, and to call it what? What's the problem? Object is type unknown. Oh, yeah, we need to say it's element ref of HTML button element. Well, it's possibly undefined. No, it's not undefined. We could do view child dot required, right? Yeah, great job. What? Didn't import it. Yes. Now this will not work. I bet this will not work. We're using without Zone.js, we cannot do stuff like element listener. Let's check it. Yeah, no way this works. Let's add a console log here. Console.log. See, the button click is triggered, so it works, but it's not being change detected. Why? Because we did it outside of Angular's reach. We did it instead of like just registering a click callback. We instead used like browser's native element listener, whatever. I bet if we injected the renderer and used its method for, let's do it in another way. Let's do this dot render dot listen. Now this way it should probably work because we are listening via Angular's renderer, so maybe it will schedule change detection for us. Empty fish. No, what happened here? Yeah, this works now. Oh, interestingly enough, it doesn't. It actually doesn't. So if you are having directives where you did like render dot listen on some element and updated a value that was used outside of the directive, maybe like using export as or whatever to bind to the directive instance, and you're using this, well, maybe you have a problem with Zoneless. Okay. Anything like this goes. Okay, you could do like set timeout, it will work, but without mark for check. Again, not using this. Let's do a bigger timeout and maybe do like a console log and do this count plus plus again. And let's check. Doesn't do anything. And I think 4 seconds passed, but we didn't get this console log. Why? Oh, maybe I actually deleted it. Right, this is weird. Well, this is a set timeout. This should work. And after the unit is being definitely executed, and interesting. What did I do wrong? Hmm. What am I missing? Weird, weird, weird. There's some component marker checked after timeout. Console log. This should work. There's just a set timeout. Why is it not working? If we did a something crazy like this should work, right? Wait, now set timeout stopped working for whatever reason. Why is it not working? Okay, sometimes this gets stuck. Ah, we have an error here. Wow, wow, amazing. Amazing. We had an error in the build and I somehow managed to ignore it. Incredible stuff. Child crew result is required but no value is available. Oh, oh, I deleted the wrong thing again. Something like this. Yeah, this worked. No updates here, no updates here. So with Zoneless, you don't get sweet deals like this unless you are using signals. Of course, signals would fix everything in this scenario. If this count becomes a signal or an input signal or model, these updates will propagate the view. This is very simple to remember about Zoneless, okay? If you're starting from scratch, just use signals. Only use signals in your UI. There is no good reason to not use signal in a view, and there is no good reason to use anything else other than a signal in your template. Okay, so if you're going from scratch, that's a very simple rule. Just use signals. Okay, when you're upgrading, scenarios like this are the things that are going to bug you. If you have also RxJS subscription, so if you're using async pipe, you're fine. Async pipe marking components for check by itself. Okay. If you have also some subscriptions here, if I did like of whatever dot subscribe, and I did like again a view update, again this won't work. All right. It simply doesn't care about the subscriptions. If this was in Zoneless, this would change a lot of stuff, but it doesn't here. If it was in zone-based, sorry, zone-based, Zoneless, very easy to mix those two up. So now your primary suspects will like set timeouts, RGS subscriptions, this render, listen, or maybe even worse, like document.add event listener or any element.add event listener. Those types of things are your enemies because again, in zoneless setup, event listeners like this simply work. You don't need to change anything to a signal. This is fine. And async pipe works, and if you have anything converted to a signal, this works. It's all fine and dandy. You just need to pay attention to anything async that happens out of those paradigms. Also, very bad stuff like await. Let's do an async method, and you can have something like await. This is terrible for zoneless. Whatever promise await, you should get rid of it or convert to an RxJS and then to signal, or if you cannot do any of those, use mark for check in the scenarios. All right. So yeah, I think that's kind of the big problems with Zone that you need to realize. I'd love to hear any questions before moving to, I think, the final bit that I want to explore. And this is an interesting bit. You're gonna love it, I think. Da, 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 da. I don't think we have questions at this moment, but what I'm going to talk about is, of course, again, maybe some people are gonna hate me for this, but we're going to talk about the Angular MCP server for a moment because it is relevant. Here I have the documentation, and it has this tool, it has this MCP tool, on push zoneless migration. Analyze Angular code and provides a step-by-step iterative plan to migrate it to on-push change detection, a prerequisite for a zoneless application. By the way, it's kind of worded a bit weirdly. On-push is not actually a prerequisite for a zoneless app. If it was, it would become the default, which it clearly isn't. There has been a discussion. It's not going to happen, at least for now. And I would like to use this zoneless migration. I want to open up the agent here, and let's just for a moment let's check the MCP servers, right? Oh, wait. Da, 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 da. Oh, we have to wait. Configure tools. We have like Angular. Ah, I had it in a different project. Let me just. Oh wait. Get started. Yes, code. Yes, MCP server. Let's do it. Oh wait, how was it? How was the file called? MCP JSON, right? I'm not setting up MCP servers every day, but maybe I should. MCP.json. Let's paste it here. And now we have this file. Let's configure tool use. Now we have the Angular tools somewhere. Yeah, Angular CLI. No, wait, is this different? LPM cp.json. No, it's called Angular CLI, right, right. So we can configure it to Angular CLI. Yeah, use it. Please use it. OK. And now let us generate free to check this component and figure out what needs to be changed so it works with Zoneless. And did we mark it as on push? Let's just remove it for a moment. Okay, Zoneless and on push. Well, let's see how it goes. Let's see how it goes. Starting MCP servers Angular CLI. No, don't skip it. The entire reason why I'm doing it is to check this Angular MCP server, this specific tool, how it helps with Zoneless. Or maybe it doesn't. I don't know. Let's check. Zoneless Angular, blah, blah, blah. I'll begin by using the MCP CLI list projects. Yes, sure. Okay. All right. Here's a bunch of stuff. I'm trying to use a change detection strategy, which means Zone.js to protect for Zoneless and manual activation. Wait, I don't like what's going on in this thinking stuff. Let's see what it does in the end. Let's wait. Okay, it brought us the on-push strategy. All right. All right. All right. Um, Not bad at all. Not bad at all. I mean, this is obviously a simple component, but we did a bunch of confusing things here, and I think it's handling it pretty decently. Okay, let's review the changes again. Okay, so we injected the change detection strategy and used the on push strategy here. All right. Removed. I like this. It removed the change detector ref. It wasn't being used. It wasn't kind of tempted to go on and just paste the detect changes call. It changed our counter property to a signal. Absolutely correct decision. And it did this in the subscription and whatever. It did this count update. So it essentially moved it to a signal. I like it. I like it. I like what it did. Maybe if you are migrating your app to Zoneless, just give a shot to this MCP tool and check, iterate over a component, check what it changes. But what it did here, and it's a small component, but it's fairly confusing. But it kind of exactly found the solution. Just change this to signal. Now it works. Uh, I'm mildly impressed. It is actually fine. Not bad at all. Not bad at all. So yes, I guess this is it for today. We we covered a lot of ground. We talked about Zone.js, how it worked, what it did, and why we didn't really like it. We talked about the change detection strategies, what it actually means for a component to be on push, what the difference between detect changes and mark for check is. Important one, remember it for future Angular interviews. We dispelled some myths. Zone.js doesn't do change detection doesn't do rendering. On push is kind of independent from zoneless. You can have a zoneless app, and you can have a component that is not on push, and you can have on push in a Zone.js based app. It's not necessarily required for one another. I hope it was helpful. We also covered this in the end, this MCP tool from the Angular's MCP server. I find it decent. Please, if you try it on more complex stuff, please let me know. Send me code examples, maybe repos, whatever. I would love to see it used on a more complex scenario. Let's see how it goes. And yeah, thank you too, Michael. Thanks for coming to all of my streams. I really appreciate that you enjoyed. Really appreciate everyone. Thanks everyone for attending. If you have any questions about it, feel free to reach out to me as always. And good night, everyone. Well, good night for me. Bye.